tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is talk radio. I've been a long-time talk radio fan. I really cut my teeth in the media industry doing a daily talk radio show. And I know a lot of you who listen to this show used to listen to me on the radio, whether it was in London, in Toronto, and in Calgary. And I thank you very much for that. But the talk radio of today is very different than the talk radio of yesterday and 2 days ago and several years ago. And I say that with a fair bit of sadness, because talk radio used to be like the bastion of unequivocally irreverent speech, of being able to challenge conventional orthodoxy, being able to have debates, air controversial opinions, not for the sake of controversy, but because they are discussions that need to be had. And it has gotten increasingly woke in Canada. And I would say there are a few better able to attest to that than Jamil Jivani, who hosted a fantastic show on Bell Media's News Talk 1010 in Toronto, although his management seemed to want it to be a lot less fantastic. And I want to bring in Jamil to talk about this, now the president of the Canada Strong and Free Network. Jamil, good to talk to you, sir. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. I certainly share your passion for what talk radio used to be. And I mean, it's great we have platforms like yours where we can still have some of these important conversations.
Well, we'll blow the minds of our former employers, both of whom fired each of us. But let's talk about this, because you hosted a great show on News Talk 1010. You talked about a lot of things. You introduced yourself to a lot of people who didn't know you. And it was fascinating when they fired you. And you know, it was, I'd say there's a bit of a purge going on in radio at the time. Danielle Smith, I know, in Alberta was having some issues around the same time frame, not connected to you or your case, but there were these changes. And we've started to see a little bit more about this in court documents, because you are suing Bell Media for your termination. And the one notable one that I really want to talk about here is this accusation that Bell has made to you, that you, who, as I understand it, were the only black man on the station, were insufficiently diverse for them.
That's exactly right. It's very confusing exactly what diversity means to a company like Bell, because they say they want people from different backgrounds, but they don't seem to want anyone to actually bring their perspective to their job. So they want to celebrate, oh, this person's from this community, this person has this identity. But then when you want to talk about what's happening in the world, all of a sudden they'd like for everyone to sound the same, which doesn't sound like diversity and inclusion to me. And I think one of the key examples of this was around, you know, all the COVID stuff. You know, I hosted my show last year when, of course, COVID was the main thing on the news every single day. And, you know, I'm a black man. I come from a community where, because of history and because of other reasons, a lot of people were hesitant to get the vaccine. And Bell wanted me to talk about that if I was willing to deliver the message that they wanted. They wanted me to come on the radio and shame people and hate people and say, you know, mean things about people who wouldn't be vaccinated. And my point of view was look, I mean, part of diversity is recognizing people have different life experiences, and I'm not going to attack people who make a different decision, even if it's not the same decision I made. And that was where so much of our conflict came from. And you can see even in the court documents, which I encourage people to check out on my Twitter page. I posted a link to where you can read them yourself. They basically say, I didn't shill the Liberal Party's lines on COVID-19, and that's one of the reasons they fired me, which is kind of a mind-blowing thing to say out loud. They say on the record. I was very surprised to read it, to be honest.
Yeah, in a way it was weird, because I read your initial filing, and you're making all these claims, which of course I should say haven't been tested in court, about why they fired you. And then in their defense, they basically reaffirm everything you accused them of doing, and try to put their own spin on it, of course. And one of them, they say point blank in their defense filing here that you were not committed to their diversity and equity and inclusion policies and all of that. And some of the other things they included as your alleged transgressions, I found ridiculous. One of them was you had an interview with an MP, Kathy Wagentall, who didn't toe the government's line on vaccination. And you say you were supposed to be more aggressive or assertive in shouting down whatever she was saying. And it's Kathy Wagentall, I've interviewed her before. She was offering the unorthodox position. She was challenging the position you could get anywhere else. So the idea that you then need to, silence her or rebut her, I find ridiculous. And again, really a rejection of what talk radio used to be.
Yeah, I mean, MP Wagenthal is a duly elected member of our parliament. For her to be given an opportunity to share her perspective on an important issue seems like exactly what the media is supposed to do. We're supposed to bring forward perspectives that are influencing public policy, influencing the way politics and government work. And yet Bell seemed to want just one perspective to be allowed on their airwaves, which is just, I mean, as I said, I'm surprised they admitted it. I mean, they behaved that way. They tried to punish me. They certainly conducted themselves like a group of people with a bias toward the Liberal Party. But for them to actually come out and admit it is a whole other story. I mean, I was very surprised. And to your point also, Andrew, about, the me not sort of complying with diversity. Like, let's be specific about what they wanted. These guys put out last November, about a year ago today, they put out a plan that was about segregation, that was about putting together diversity groups that would have meetings based on all the Black people get together, all the Indigenous people get together, all the white people get together. That's not diversity. That's segregation. That's literally the opposite of diversity. You're telling people that in order to have important conversations about our workplace as employees of Bell, we cannot do that with people who look differently than us. We have to be separated from one another. And I'm against diversity by saying I don't want to be part of that. Like, this is nuts. These businesses want to get into the world of micromanaging people's identities. And then when someone, whether you're Black, Indigenous, a woman, part of the LGBT community, whatever it is, even if you're a white guy, they want to tell you how you're supposed to think about yourself and the political views you're supposed to have. That's not business. That's creepy, weird approach to diversity. And the idea that I was a problematic employee because I thought as an individual I should be treated with respect, that's nuts. And that's really at the crux of the lawsuit, which is like, our business is allowed to treat people this way. I believe it's against the law and I believe it's illegal. And, that's exactly why I'm taking them to court.
When you were hired, was there ever a sense that you had in your discussions with them, either formally or informally, of what they wanted you to be and what they wanted you to say, whether it was a particular position or a particular issue, or did they just look at you and, based on a couple of interviews you'd done and perhaps your book and things you'd written, just assume that they had you figured out and they knew where you were going to go once you were on air?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of people there who I would say have a very simplistic sense of how to work with people who come from a different background or perspective than them. And so some of those people, like there's one particular manager named in the lawsuit, and Bell names her in their statement of defense, Hillary White, ironically named, who had a very big problem with me and was constantly trying to, in my view, intimidate me and try to like force certain perspectives on me. And when I tried to speak up for myself, and you can see the dysfunctional workplace at Bell in other examples, like with Lisa LaFlamme, for example. Danielle Graham is another person who's got a lawsuit against Bell over some of these issues. They try to, punish you into submission, into compliance. And I don't think that's actually what a healthy workplace is supposed to be like. So it was very difficult. There was a manager there who did, I think, try to have a genuine, honest understanding of diversity. His name was Mike Bendixson, and he was fired a couple months before I was. I don't know exactly why, but I can tell you that when they let him go, it just, the one manager who seemed to have a healthy view on these issues was gone, and all of a sudden the place just started to fall apart. And that's, and then they blamed the employees for that. And it's like, well, maybe management should take some responsibility for some of this dysfunction.
Now, it's funny because in Bell's response, they talk about the diversity issues and the fact that you misgendered Demi Lovato or something. And they go on with some of these other things we've discussed. And then they say, oh, yeah, and his ratings were bad. Was that ever something that was brought to you?
No. In fact, as I mentioned, I only had one ratings period that I was able to do the show for before I was fired and suspended and all these other things went on. So that one ratings period, they gave me a bonus for. because of the performance of the show. And I actually have an email from my boss saying congratulations. So the ratings thing is very weird. I mean, the reality is, and as I'm sure you would imagine, ratings for all radio went down during COVID because people weren't commuting to work in their
Yeah.
cars as much. So I think what Bell's trying to do is act like that was sort of my fault as a way to justify the firing. But here's what I would say to you, Andrew. If there was a business reason to let me go, why are they bringing up all these other things? Like, if it was just about business, why couldn't they just say his ratings are bad, we had to let him go? Most people would accept that. And if that were the honest reason that I was fired, why were we having these arguments? Like, they mention all these other things about diversity and Justin Trudeau and Kathy Wagenthal because it wasn't about ratings, and that they felt the need to address all these other issues because their case based on ratings is so weak. And you'll even notice, and again, I encourage anyone, you can read Bell's statement of defense in their own words. Go on my Twitter page and I post it there, and you'll read it and see they actually present no evidence to back up their claim about ratings at all. It's literally, they just say it. There's no
It's just like a line basically that they just sort of just throw out there and see if it sticks.
There's no quotation, there are no numbers, there's no actual information given. Where do they have information? Well, they've got quotes when it comes to me not defending Justin Trudeau. They've got quotes when it comes to me not taking their position on Demi Lovato and her journey in self-identification. They've got examples for that, but no examples to ratings, right? So it's a very bizarre approach they've taken. And it seems to me, in my personal view, they've underestimated how much Canadians expect media to have some sort of credibility, some objectivity, some effort to be middle of the road. I think a lot of Canadians expect that. I don't think that Bell is offering them that in their media coverage.
Radio is a cartoonishly precarious industry. I think like the line when I started out is that you hadn't made it in radio until you had been fired. Like some of those old time radio guys would, get fired on Monday morning and they'd be somewhere else Tuesday afternoon. And I think stations have the right to put whatever they want on air. And I know you're a free market guy, so you'd agree with that as well. Let me just ask then, what is the core of your issue? Is it, the fact that they, canceled you for these reasons, or is it something more fundamental?
Yeah, I mean, the core of the issue is they created certain expectations of me as an employee based on my race, based on the community I come from, based on the color of my skin, or my name. All these things, they created unique expectations on me and then punished me when I didn't meet those expectations. That is, I think, by most definitions, racism. It is racist to say, because of what you look like, you have to do your job a certain way. And when you don't stay within the boundaries we give you, we punish you for being the wrong type of Black person. That is what the crux of the issue is for me. As I said before, I do believe that in businesses, I do believe in capitalism. A lot of the good things about our country are the result of us embracing free market economics. At the same time, I'm also a believer in people being treated as individuals. I'm a believer in equality before the law. And you cannot, whether you're on the left in this case or you're on the right, whatever the example would be, decide you're going to treat people differently based on what they look like. And that is fundamentally wrong, in my opinion. And that's why I decided to bring this case forward. I think that we've gotten to this point where we believe liberals and people on the left, like the management at Bell Media, are allowed to get away with racism. And then they accuse everyone else on the other side of being the racist. And I'm saying, no. You guys are the racists. You're treating me differently because of what I look like, because of who my father is, because of where my father comes from. And that's not right. And we're going to deal with that through the court system.
This may shock people in this colorblind world, but I'm not Black, so I don't have the, the experience of being a member of that community. But, I don't even like talking about people in terms of communities, because people are individuals. And that seems to be the issue they had with you, that you were an individual and that, your community certainly colors and shapes your perspective, but it doesn't confine you to one particular perspective. And I feel that it's just so laughable that this idea of diversity, this idea of having more voices represented from a variety of backgrounds, which is important, only extends when those voices say certain things.
Yeah, and that's exactly the problem. I mean, I have email documentation of Bell encouraging me to talk about vaccine issues in the Black community. They brought me on CTV News to talk about the issue.
But they wanted you to do a PSA, basically. They wanted you to promote vaccination to the people in the Black community.
Exactly. But as you said, Andrew, I'm a human being. So I know that when I take that responsibility on, I have to do that with integrity. And part of doing that with integrity is showing respect to people in my community who have a different point of view. And then when I go on the radio and show respect to people who make a different decision, then I'm being punished for it. Well, you can't control a person that way. That is fundamentally wrong, to say we're going to use your race when it's convenient to us, but then when you want to show respect to people with the same identity as you, we're going to punish you for it. That is a kind of manipulation that is only possible when you have a business like Bell, who thinks that they are so above any kind of moral expectation, any moral standard, that they can get away with anything they want. And the reality is, no matter how big and rich you are in this country, no matter how big of a business you are, no matter how much power you have as a Bell executive, you're still beholden to the law. And that's exactly why a lawsuit is necessary here. They can't get away with treating people this way.
You are taking on the machine, and I couldn't be happier for you, Jamil Jivani. So thank you for that, and best of luck. And just on a purely unrelated topic here, I know you've written in the past about your friendship with JD Vance. You went to law school with him at Yale. Any thoughts on his big victory last night in Ohio?
You know, I'm just happy for him. Like, I know a lot of the coverage has sort of pointed to the fact that Republicans did not have the quote unquote red wave as many expected. A lot of these Senate races and congressional races were more competitive than people thought. But I knew JD's wasn't going to be that competitive because he's been working his butt off. He's been connecting with people in Ohio. He's from there. He's got a story that you can read about in his book, Hillbilly Elegy. You can watch the movie on Netflix. People know where he comes from, and he's lived through the issues that a lot of people in Ohio want solutions to. So I'm happy for him. I think he's going to be fantastic as a senator. You know, I think of him as my big brother. Like, I love the guy. And so nothing but positive vibes for me. I mean, I can't wait to see what he does when he's, actually in the Senate, being able to use his voice for good.
Perhaps you'll be able to get Senator Vance at one of the Canada Strong and Free conferences coming up.
I hope so.
All right, pull any clout you can. Jamil, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.